Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I've lately been reading Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh, and it took me quite some time to finish reading because it's such a hefty and inclusive novel. It's a nostalgic look back at a declining world, and it's beautifully written with a great sense of humor in Evelyn Waugh's language, and it actually left me with a strange mix of emotions because on the one hand, I think there's a deep sadness there throughout the novel, but also there seems to be a flicker of hope by the end of it that the characters seem to find some kind of inner peace for themselves. So I want to share some of my thoughts with you all and discuss this complex novel. And if you've read it too, please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. The story unfolds through the eyes of Charles Ryder, an army officer during World War II, and it begins in 1942 when Charles's unit arrives at a new camp. Upon seeing the location, a flood of memories washes over him because the place as he recognizes it is Brideshead, is the mansion of the aristocratic Flight family, and is a place that played a pivotal role in his younger years. Charles then guides us back to the past as his memories of Brideshead come flooding back, and actually almost the entire story is a flashback. As Charles Ryder puts it, "My theme is memory, that winged host that soared about me one gray morning of wartime. These memories, which are my life, for we possess nothing certainly except the past, were always with me. Like the pigeons of St. Mark's, they were everywhere, under my feet, singly, in pairs, in little honey-voiced congregations, nodding, strutting, winking, rolling the tender feathers of their necks, perching sometimes if I stood still on my shoulder, until suddenly the noon gun boomed, and in a moment, with a flutter and sweep of wings, the pavement was bare, and the whole sky above dark with a tumult of fowl. Thus it was that morning of wartime." So most of the narrative unfolds between the two world wars. The once unshakable glory of the empire was fading, and the aristocratic class with its traditional values was also in decline. But this era also offered a taste of newfound freedom, like leisure activities like dancing and cinema flourished, and consumer goods like radios and gramophones became popular. Yet, beneath this carefree veneer lurked a dark cloud. The Great Depression was hitting hard, and the shadow of another war loomed large. So this historical backdrop shapes the character's experience in Brideshead Revisited. So the story is divided into 3 parts, and Book 1 is titled Et in Arcadia Ego, which is a Latin phrase and can be translated into even in Arcadia, I am here, or even in Arcadia, there I am. Arcadia refers to a utopian paradise in Greek mythology, and the phrase is often linked to a famous painting, The Arcadian Shepherds, by 17th century French painter Nicolas Poussin. And the painting depicts 3 shepherds and a woman in a pastoral landscape. They gathered around a tomb with an inscription that reads, Et in Arcadia Ego. The painting actually sparked many interpretations. Some say I on the tomb refers to the person buried there. It serves as a reminder that even those who lived in a utopian paradise like Arcadia couldn't escape their mortality. And another interpretation suggests that I refers to death itself. It's a chilling reminder that death is always present, even in a happy paradise like Arcadia. And actually, this concept behind Et in Arcadia Ego predates Poussin's painting. Italian Baroque artist Giovanni Francesco Barbieri depicted similar themes in an earlier painting with a skull explicitly representing mortality. In Book 1 of Brideshead Revisited, Charles's memory begins with his youth as a student at Oxford University, where he meets Sebastian, the youngest son of the aristocratic Flight family. And by the way, I like how Charles describes his first sight of Sebastian. I knew Sebastian by sight long before I met him. That was unavoidable, for from his first week, he was the most conspicuous man of his year by reason of his beauty, which was arresting, and his eccentricities of behavior, which seemed to know no bounds. My first sight of him was in the door of Germa's, and on that occasion I was struck less by his looks than by the fact that he was carrying a large teddy bear. And when Sebastian invites Charles for luncheon for the first time, Charles pauses to consider whether or not he should go, and eventually he decides to go, and here's how he describes his reasoning. But I was in search of love in those days, and I went full of curiosity and a faint, unrecognized apprehension that here at last I should find that low door in the wall, which others, I knew, had found before me, which opened on an enclosed and enchanted garden, which was somewhere not overlooked by any window in the heart of that great city. I was thinking what this low door in the wall actually means, and some say it could be a homage to Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, where Alice travels to Wonderland through a rabbit hole, but also it reminds me of the Peach Blossom Spring written by ancient Chinese poet Tao Yanming. In the side of the hill was a small opening, which seemed to promise a gleam of light. The fisherman left his boat and entered the opening. It was almost too cramped at first to afford his passage, but when he had taken a few dozen steps, he emerged into the open light of day. Just like the fisherman who stumbles upon a hidden paradise, the Peach Blossom Spring, through a small opening in the hill, and Alice who discovers a fantastical world through a rabbit hole, Charles finds his own version of Arcadia through the low door in the wall, and this symbolic doorway leads him to Brideshead, the grand estate of the Flight family, and together with Sebastian, Charles escapes into a world of youthful reverie. But Charles seems to be aware of the fleeting nature of beauty because he purchases a human skull from the School of Medicine, which bore the motto "Et in Arcadia Ego" inscribed on his forehead, and that looks like a constant reminder of mortality. However beautiful life may be, it is not eternal, and there's an ever-present shadow of death. This can be physical death, but it can also be the death of love, the passing away of youthfulness, or the fading of youthful ideals, or the loss of hope. And in fact, this seemingly idyllic life at Brideshead is somehow overshadowed by Sebastian's alcoholism and a major difference between Charles and Sebastian, which is their religion. Charles is agnostic, but Sebastian and his entire family are Catholic, although this does not seem like a conflict at first. In Book 2, Brideshead Deserted, we see Sebastian's struggle with alcoholism intensifies, and his relationship with his mother, Lady Marchman, who is a pious Catholic, becomes increasingly strained. Lady Marchman gets angry with Charles for supplying Sebastian booze, and when Charles drives away from Brideshead, thinking that he would never return, he reflects on that low door in the wall. A door had shut, the low door in the wall I had sought and found in Oxford, open it now, and I should find no enchanted garden. And in the meantime, Lady Marchman's hold on the family is weakening because years after her husband left her, Sebastian exiles himself to the Middle East, and Sebastian's sister, Julia, also claims to shut her mind against her religion. And ultimately, Lady Marchman dies of illness. But Cordelia, the youngest daughter in the family who is committed to Catholicism, explains the family's faith to Charles one evening after her mother's death. And she tells Charles that no matter how far they stray from the church, the Flights will always feel a twitch upon the thread, bringing them back. And this leads to the third part of the novel, which is titled A Twitch Upon the Thread. So Charles says he lived nearly 10 dead years after that evening with Cordelia. He becomes a well-known painter but finds himself disillusioned and trapped in a loveless marriage. And by chance, he encounters Sebastian's sister Julia again. A passionate romance blossoms between them. Charles and Julia plan to divorce their respective spouses and marry each other, but their plans are tragically doomed by faith. The enduring power of Catholic religion ultimately stood between them and shattered their dreams of a life together. So, it is a sad story, but actually, as the title indicates, this part is mainly about how the characters who seem to have drifted away from church are brought back by an invisible force, just like a twitch upon the thread of God. So first, there's Lord Marchman, who was the patriarch of the Flight family. He kind of abandoned his faith years ago and is trapped in Venice and lives with his mistress. He cannot go back to England because his wife is there and he hates her. But now he's terminally ill and his wife has died. He returns to Brideshead to die. And as he lies on his deathbed, there is a fierce debate on whether they should get the priest to come and anoint him. Charles believes Lord Marchman wouldn't want that because he's led the church years ago and he even mocked the church. But Julia and some other members of her family cling to the hope that even a man who rejected faith for so long might yearn for forgiveness at the hour of death. So finally, they do get the priest to come, and by that time, Lord Marchman is already in coma, and the priest whispers a prayer for absolution, and Charles, who is a self-claimed agnostic, who's not even sure if he believes in God, suddenly finds himself praying for a sign, a gesture of acceptance from Lord Marchman. And here's what he is thinking. I suddenly felt the longing for a sign, if only of courtesy, if only for the sake of the woman I loved, who knelt in front of me, praying I knew for a sign. It seemed so small a thing that was asked, the bare acknowledgement of a present, a nod in the crowd. I prayed more simply, God forgive him his sins, and please God, make him accept your forgiveness. So small a thing to ask. The priest took the little silver box from his pocket and spoke again in Latin, touching the dying man with an oily wand. He finished what he had to do, put away the box, and gave the final blessing. Suddenly, Lord Marchman moved his hand to his forehead. I thought he had felt the touch of the chrism and was wiping it away. Oh God, I prayed, don't let him do that. But there was no need for fear. The hand moved slowly down his breast, then to his shoulder, and Lord Marchman made the sign of the cross. So Lord Marchman accepts absolution from a priest and dies as a Catholic. And it was also by that moment that Julia realizes that she still needs God. She says she knows she's always been bad, but the worse she is, the more she needs God, and that is why she cannot be with Charles. She had to sacrifice her happiness to be close to God. And also Sebastian, who once ignored many of the rules of Catholicism in his youth, nonetheless chooses to live and work at a Catholic monastery. So the members of the Flight family are all kind of pulled back by that twitch upon the thread. But most surprising of all, the twitch upon the thread also brings Charles to Catholicism. When years later Charles returns to Brideshead as an army officer, he goes to the chapel and finds it showing no ill effects of his long neglect. Many years ago, he entered the chapel for its beauty. He now kneels there as a man of faith. And he is happy to realize that even though cities can be destroyed and savages might rule, that small red flame of faith is being passed on for generations. So as you can see, Catholicism is a central theme here, and it's actually hinted at from the very beginning in the full title of the novel, Brideshead Revisited, the secret and profane memories of Captain Charles Ryder. And Evelyn Waugh himself, in the preface, confirms this by describing his goal as to explore the operation of divine grace on a group of diverse but closely connected characters. And he says the theme might be presumptuously large, but he makes no apology for it. And even the name Brideshead also carries some symbolic meaning because in Christian theology, the church is often referred to as the bride of Christ to signify the spiritual union between Christ and his followers. So the Brideshead Castle can be seen as a representation of the church itself. And Charles's experience with Brideshead perhaps can represent his experience with Catholicism. Despite his decay, Brideshead retains a powerful allure, drawing characters back again and again in their search for a way to reconnect with their spiritual roots. So I think the author's religious view is very clear in the novel. Even Waugh was a Catholic himself, he converted to Catholicism at the age of 26. But in this novel, he doesn't preach or promise a simple path to happiness through religion. And quite on the contrary, religion seems to be the source of suffering or unhappiness of the characters in the story. Like Julia, for example, gives up her love in order to pursue her religion, and Sebastian finds himself close to God within the walls of a monastery, but his life is far from blissful. And even Cordelia, whose devotion appears joyful, grows up quite plain, and Charles finds her ugly and thinks that the spark she had as a child had been thwarted. And here's a dialogue between Cordelia and Charles about the situation of Sebastian. Cordelia paints a picture of Sebastian's future that's dedicated to his faith, yet marked by struggle. And actually, this is my favorite part in this book. Let me read it. Poor Sebastian, I said, is too pitiful. How would it end? I think I can tell you exactly, Charles. I've seen others like him, and I believe they are very near and dear to God. He'll live on half in, half out of the community, a familiar figure pottering round with his broom and his bunch of keys. He'll be a great favorite with the old fathers, something of a joke to the novices. Everyone will know about his drinking. He'll disappear for 2 or 3 days every month or so, and they'll all nod and smile and say in their various accents, "Old Sebastian's on the spree again." And then he'll come back, disheveled and shamefaced, and be more devout for a day or two in the chapel. He'll probably have little hiding places about the garden where he keeps a bottle and takes a swing now and then on the sleigh. They'll bring him forward to act as guide whenever they have an English-speaking visitor, and he'll be completely charming so that before they go, they'll ask about him and perhaps be given a hint that he has high connections at home. If he lives long enough, generations of missionaries in all kinds of remote places will think of him as a queer old character who was somehow part of the hope of their student days and remember him in their masses. He'll develop little eccentricities of devotion, intense personal cults of his own. He'll be found in the chapel at odd times and missed when he's expected. Then one morning, after one of his drinking bouts, he'll be picked up at the gate, dying, and show by a mere flicker of the eyelid that he is conscious when they give him last sacraments. It's not such a bad way of getting through one's life. I thought of the youth with the teddy bear under the flowering chestnuts. It's not what one would have foretold, I said. I suppose he doesn't suffer. Oh yes, I think he does. One can have no idea what the suffering may be, to be maimed as he is. No dignity, no power of will. No one is ever holy without suffering. I mean, it's so heartbreaking to think of this contrast between the youthful, carefree Sebastian and his predicted future. But the author is actually suggesting that devotion isn't about escaping suffering, but about finding the meaning and purpose of life within it. So while Sebastian's life may be far from ideal, is filled with struggles and limitations, his dedication to his faith gives his existence a new direction, and his flaws don't disappear but becomes part of his journey. So all in all, I think it's a very rich novel. It's full of metaphors and symbolism, and of course there's a lot that I haven't touched upon, and I think is really worth reading. If you've already read it, please tell me what you think. And that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon.